Another speed build. If you're new here on the channel, we do speed builds in The Sims. I post one generally every week, and this week we are building a cafe. Yes, I know that I have another cafe out of the like 6 builds that I have done, but this time it's a bakery and cafe. And it's really because this was the first Get to Work. It was the first expansion pack I actually bought, knowing that it is possibly the least well regarded. People don't like island living, which I don't really get either, because at least for sure the scenery in island living, the world you get with island living is for sure superior to Magnolia Promenade, and it's 4 lots. But I really was excited about Get to Work because one of my favorite, I think I would say probably favorite video games was The Sims 2 Get to Business, Back to Business, whatever it was. But basically the Sims 2 game where you could run your own store. It's one of my favorite things to do in games. So since I got The Sims 4, I had planned on buying a retail store. I have not done that. I've built a lot of things. I've gotten hardly any gameplay done. I did manage to get I went through a couple of Sims before I kind of started to stick to one, but the one family that I've been playing, the wife now, since she got married, started out as a single woman. Her dream is to own a bakery, and so we are finally today building the Crumb, which is her dream bakery. So I had kind of modeled this off of, you'll see that we've kind of got this weird mishmash of styles going on here, because I modeled this off of a reference photo I found. It's not quite a real to Sims, but it's probably the closest I've ever stuck to a reference I've had. Usually I pull a bunch of references and use them as references, as one does when I want to check a style or something, but the builds I build are usually not super close to any one image. This one is probably the closest I've done. It's still not like a real to Sims by any means, but it was this restaurant I found that looked like it was an older kind of, this like European style older building that they had built kind of like a container on the front, like brought it up closer to the street to add this restaurant onto. So that was very much my inspiration for the build here. So you see that we have this older, more like mansard looking building, kind of like that French, I don't know, I just think it was European, old European, it's not really old US, old European style building, and then we have this much more modern take on the front. And I liked that. I think this is from the reference. I'll try and throw it up here for you guys if I get a chance to. It kind of sat at an angle, so it was like they changed the front of the building. You'll see like I put windows on the side here, but I delete them because in reality you can't do this in The Sims 4. And I even play with like throwing in one of the facades to make it look this way, but in reality this would be on a block of buildings without any space between. So I decided just to kind of leave. Eventually I put some landscaping in there just because I thought the gallery image looked really weird with the blank space. But in reality this would be right up against another building, so I took out all the windows on that side. But so this one is, I have it set up as both a cafe and a bakery. Like I really wanted to do a bakery. It's apparently like the worst retail store. Apparently any of the retail, like you can't actually make money from them if you make things, is what I have heard. But I like the thematics of a bakery. So this kind of, the idea here is that it's like an upscale cafe slash bakery, like the place you would go for Sunday brunch, and then older neighborhood, and then even though you can't technically live in the buildings in The Sims, I do add a loft upstairs because from my understanding that it's really more practical to just kind of, even though your Sims have to have a house, they can't like just have their business at their house and get to work. That is much more practical to make sure your Sims basically live at the business and just go home to pay their bills. So we do have a full loft upstairs, like a 1-bedroom, because again, you're not going to have a family because it doesn't really work very well with Get to Work. But here we are starting to work on the interior, which I do go for this very industrial vibe too, which is kind of my tendency anyway. Like I definitely lean towards minimalist industrial vibes, but that was specifically what we were going for here. It matches this kind of containery add-on. I recognize that now. I just realized I'm building in some ways a second container coffee shop, but I like the idea of building the community lots. I probably will do more in the future because I feel like you can get a little bit more creative with them than a house. There's a little more variety in what you can put in. I recognize they're not as practical for gameplay in The Sims because they're honestly in most cases like kind of just annoying. Like the restaurants and dine out are kind of annoying, but I do enjoy building them. So this will not, I imagine, be the last cafe or coffee shop you see me build on this channel. But I'm curious what you guys think about Get to Work, because as much as people like, I can see how like it's the first expansion pack and maybe it wasn't that exciting, and definitely like the main appeal of it being like, oh, you get to follow your Sims to work gets old really fast. But like there's only a couple careers you can do that with, and then once you've done that, like there really isn't a lot to the pack compared to other ones. But I feel like I find myself using a lot of these, and again, it's probably because I like to build community lots, a lot of the basic items from Get to Work. You will see, I don't know if you noticed it, but I had used one of the like set pieces from Get Famous, thinking about trying to actually make it look like there was another building over there, but I do end up trashing in the end. I just didn't like it. It didn't fit in. The sets are kind of like dingy, and I just felt like it ended up making the build look not as good, honestly. So I do end up trashing that eventually and just kind of sticking a tree there to fill in the empty space. But we're back here trying to work on the indoor floor plan, and I got to check off one of those things that if you have seen those like lists of things you've done in The Sims 4. One of them is have you placed the Cupcake Machine. I can now check that off because I don't know how you would ever place that in the house. But we did, and I actually had to expand the kitchen here to make room for it. But I did. This kitchen works. It's fully functional. It's very minimal, which I think is fine because industrial kitchens tend to be like there's no clutter in an industrial kitchen generally. It's all very clean and antiseptic is the word I'm looking for here. This is my favorite part of the build, and this was definitely inspired a little bit by Freezer Bunny. I know I'd seen him do something like this in one of his builds where he used these dividers and raised them up to make like a decorative sign here over the counter. I do end up swapping out where the cafe part is with the display cases just because I didn't want it to mess with any of the functionality. I will say I did not play test the cafe part. I don't know why it wouldn't work. Like it has all the required items to be a cafe instead of a retail shop, and like everything's placed normally back there, so I don't see why you would have any problems running as a cafe. Because I had envisioned it mainly as the bakery and the cafes, just because in real life, I don't know, especially in Brazil at least, and in the US, like there's no very few places that are just a bakery where you go and buy baked goods. Almost all of them function as a bakery slash restaurant, bakery slash cafe, but particularly in the in Brazil for sure. When you go to this is probably more based on a U.S. bakery, but for sure in Brazil, like when you go to the bakery, you can also get coffee. You can get coffee almost anywhere in Brazil, but it was actually something when we moved here that was kind of hard for me, and maybe why I so want to build coffee shops is that I've just always been a big coffee shop person. I loved the coffee shop in like the college town I lived in growing up in college. I spent a lot of time there, and Brazil doesn't have quite the same like culture around coffee shops. We do have a few where I live, but they're definitely like, a lot of them are either American imports like Starbucks, or there's just very few of them. It's funny because I feel like what influenced the apartment I ended up in was that we lived very close to one. But even that one was started by a guy who had lived in the US for a while and came back to Brazil and wanted kind of an American coffee shop experience. But I think that's part of it is this is kind of my homage to coffee shop culture. And here we are in the cluttering. I don't know if you noticed that I pull a room out of the gallery that is from Simlissi, because I wasn't sure, like these coffee bags I learned in the other cafe build you can get from Debug just by searching for coffee, but there are certain items like I've learned from Debug that will go through the gallery and ones that won't, and I knew by pulling them from her room for sure they will transfer through the gallery, so you shouldn't have any problem with things disappearing here. And I got these coffee cups from, so here you see me pulling it again to get some more coffee cups to fill this up. But I know that Twisted Mexi, I think I've mentioned Twisted Mexi for like 3 videos straight, but his mods are super helpful if you're a builder, especially if you're a builder who wants to use things from Debug. And I don't know why you wouldn't, because for sure Debug adds a lot of options for clutter and some outdoor decorating and cheap landscaping. I mentioned last time he has this expanded build by now where you can add some rows to your build screen. So instead of these 2, you can hit a key and get all 5, which is super helpful for looking through Debug. But he's also working on an organized Debug, and I believe part of that is going to be making sure that that you can tell what's going through the gallery. I can't, obviously it's not released yet, so who knows, but that will be a huge help, because I know in at least one build I made, I used a bunch of Debug stuff. I went to replace it from the gallery and realized I had to like re-clutter everything. But you can see here we've moved on upstairs to our industrial loft. My other quirk here, besides building too many coffee shops, is lofted bedrooms. I have built, I think only the one tiny house is the only bedroom I've built that's not lofted, but it made sense here. You have this big industrial space. I like this idea of it keeping the industrial character of having these like support beams, having the big windows. And so we have another lofted bedroom, but you know what? I like them. I like lofts. They look nice. So if you don't like lofts, this is probably not the channel for you. I think I've gotten it out of my system. A lot of it was because we got ladders and it was exciting to use the ladders. I did use the stairs here because it made sense. Like we have tall wall heights here, which I think is maybe the first time I've used tall wall heights. I mean, they don't, very rarely I feel like make sense, but in this context, I felt like they worked. This space also does end up with 2 office areas, and part of that was, I mentioned before, like your Sims can't, like this can't be their actual residence. I have everything in here that you would need for your Sims to like stay here. And the reason there are 2 like workstations would be the idea that like in addition to owning the business, your other sim would probably work for home. So you might have a sim who's a writer or does one of the other freelance careers, because if they go to work, they'll go back to their house. So like if you wanted to play this, which it is play tested, I played a little bit before I uploaded it to the gallery to play test it all. You could own the bakery downstairs. You can't actually own a cafe. So if you want to run it as a cafe, well then you have a cafe and a random house up top. But if you run the bakery downstairs, you could have your others, like if you have a couple of sims, the other sim could work from home writing. You could obviously stick in an easel. It was fun to finally get to use this giant artwork that doesn't fit anywhere else. And I also really liked how this TV came out. It felt very Brazilian to me, because they always have this kind of style of TV where you have like the wood behind the rack. And so I really love this loft. It doesn't make any sense if you think about it, because anybody who owns a tiny bakery and cafe cannot afford a loft this nice. So we're just gonna assume that the other sim who works here, who works from home, actually works in like finance or something, because that's the sort of career you would need to actually afford this apartment. But it was super fun to build. So here we are starting to work on that second office space I was telling you about, so that you can have both sims can kind of work from home here. One can work on the business, and then the other one can work on writing or some sort of freelance career. And then we jump up here, and this is where we have the bedroom and the 1 bathroom, which the bathroom was, I mean, obviously it made sense to have the ensuite because this is the 1 bedroom in the loft. But I ended up deciding, I kind of went back and forth on whether it should also connect to the hallway. Originally I had it as both, like the suite bathroom you could access from the bedroom without having to go back in the hallway, and like the hallway as if you had guests. But just because of layout, I ended up taking out the second door there that's in the hallway. So if you have guests, they have to go downstairs and use the public bathrooms, which is probably a little bit unfortunate, but it just worked out for layout. I do really love how this bedroom came together. It ended up having kind of I mean, I carried some of this mid-century modern through it, but it ended up with a little bit of this like mid-century modern meets boho, kind of like bohemian style with the chests, and I end up using a hanging from Vampires, which I have to say, Vampires is a pack that I would not have purchased had I not had children who got really intrigued. Actually, they were terrified of it at first, and then that somehow turned into fascination. And so they saved up their allowance money so they could buy Vampires. But I have found that the building items are actually like much more like this hanging comes from Vampires, and obviously it has a little bit of that medieval character to it. But I'm just surprised how many items from Vampires end up being surprisingly flexible and usable in other builds. So, and I think Strangerville was the same way too, that I thought, I have not found this feature of Realm of Magic though, but Strangerville is another one I was kind of hesitant about, but I find myself using, especially that cheap laptop from Strangerville, but some of the other kind of set pieces turn out to be really useful. I was trying really hard to like limit my packs in here, and then at some point I just decided I don't care. I paid for them. I paid for them on sale, but I'm gonna use them. So I do think there's ended up having a lot of different packs in here. You will see, a few times in this build I have actually pulled out Tool, and I haven't done anything crazy with it yet. I really only started using it a couple builds ago. I'm not sure exactly when, but mostly for me, I find it useful as a lot of times when I'm sizing something up or down, I don't want exactly those half or double steps, and so mostly I've been using it for that, for more precise scaling. And honestly, for that, I think it's worth it alone, and people have built some amazing things with it. I'm trying to think, I just saw one this week that somebody had done. Oh, someone made a spinning wheel with it. Like, people have done all sorts of crazy, like, custom furniture with it. Obviously it's really good if you want to like create some custom awnings to angle stuff like that. I tried to use it a bit to like angle a painting today, but it ended up just being a pain. And in fact, there may be a cutting board somewhere in this build because I went to move it, like to adjust it, and it just disappeared. So I assume it's gone, but it may be here, so who knows. I really loved how this bathroom came out. It's maybe a little weird that you would be like bathing right in front of this giant window, but you're on the 3rd floor, which is a pain for building. I learned I've never built up this high, but the camera is weird, so I'm sorry if there's a bunch of camera jumps. But I also have never really ended up with big bathrooms. And most of my builds, I usually end up with really tiny bathrooms, which don't give you a lot of flexibility. So it's kind of fun to get to decorate a bigger, more like spa-like bathroom and actually have like a chance to, I don't know, think about what I'm putting in the bathroom and how I want to lay it out and what it looks like, instead of just like, well, here's your toilet and your toilet paper and your sink, have a nice life. Here's the, I think I have probably used that hanging thing from Tiny Living in almost every bathroom because it's cute and it works, and you need some storage in your bathroom. And we are finally on to the kitchen, which is gonna be the last part of the video today. I've already built it here, but I came back and added some clutter. I just want to thank you guys if you have stuck with me, if you've been watching videos from the beginning or you just found them. I do try and post a new one every week, generally every Saturday morning around 10 a.m. Eastern. That's my goal. I am going back to school. My kids are back in online school, which is actually a lot of work for me. Not as much work for the teachers, I know, but so I don't know if I will forever be able to keep that schedule, but that's the goal. And I do really appreciate everyone who comments, who likes the videos. It's been super encouraging to see the amount of support I've gotten for them. And if there's a build you want to see in the future or something, any feedback you have, I would love to hear it. But yeah, like and subscribe so you don't miss any videos in the future, and I hope you guys have a great week. I'll see you next week. Bye.